Okay, whānau, well, it's 10:05, so how about we make a little bit of a start. Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Harvey Brookes, toko ingoa. I'm the Executive Director of the Waikato Wellbeing Project, and it's my huge pleasure to welcome you to today's webinar on Circularising Organics in the Waikato region. Just a couple of housekeeping items before I'll start with the karakia. If you're not speaking, maybe just try and keep your microphone on mute. And there is a chat function if you want to raise any points through the hui, and we'll keep an eye on those, and we can discuss those at the end if that's okay. We are recording this hui so that we're able to share this with others who weren't able to make it on our various platforms after today. So kia ora again and welcome. So I'll just start us with a karakia. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia makina kina ki utu, kia mataratara ki tai, e he yaki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhunga, homeo hui e, taiki e. And I might just translate that into English since it's the middle of winter. The wind swings to the west, then turns into a southerly, making it prickly cold inland and piercingly cold on the coast. May the dawn rise red-tipped on ice, on snow, on frost, join, gather, intertwine. You're not here to hear from me, you're here to hear from some amazing speakers about the work that's been done. But if I can just start by acknowledging the amazing work we're going to hear about today and the people that have not only co-funded it, but been the brilliant minds and hearts behind it. Valerie is going to give us a little bit of a background in a second to the project and how it relates to our sustainability goals, and so I won't repeat that. But just one thought for me, which is really why I was so motivated by this project. The Waikato Wellbeing Project has got 10 extraordinarily ambitious goals that we want to achieve by 2030, and that's only just a bit over 5 years away. And we know that there are 500,000 people in this region doing their very, very best to reach those and more across Aotearoa, New Zealand and around the world. Right now, a lot of them are looking very challenging, extremely challenging. But there's just one exception for me, and I'm not saying it's easy, but it's always struck me as achievable, and that's our goals around waste reduction. And when I first became aware of this work through Val, I was struck and stunned by the fact that in the Waikato region, 48% of our curbside rubbish is organic waste, and nearly 60% of annual landfill waste from curbside collections in the Waikato could be diverted. And those two figures are extraordinarily close to the targets that we have. So this just seems like such a high potential, high value initiative for us to do. So I don't want to oversimplify it because it's a massive piece of mahi all the same, but it's just fantastic to have these incredible speakers here today to talk about the work that has been done. So I'm going to hand over to Val, who will further introduce the project and then start the kōrero. Kia ora, Val.
Great. Can everyone see my screen? Great. Kia ora. Thank you, Harvey. Thanks for the karakia and the introduction. So I am Valerie. I'm from Waikato Regional Council, and I'm one of the Manu Taki for Sustainable Development Goal 12. So SDG 12 and the Waikato Wellbeing. So SDG 12 is all about responsible consumption and production. And as Harvey mentioned, there's goals for each SDG under the Waikato Wellbeing Project. So the goal for SDG 12 is to reduce the number of households, schools, businesses, and farms who are reducing their waste, leading to a 50% reduction of waste to landfill by 2030. So really achieving this target is all about producing less waste and designing this waste out of our daily lives. So we need systems in place to make sure that this is easy and achievable for all of us. So when we started with the Waikato Wellbeing Project, we had to figure out where we were going to get this percent from. So the Waikato and Bay of Plenty regions came together to create a regional waste and recycling stocktake. So some people might not know, but we have very poor waste data. So us doing this was quite a significant amount of work. But from that, we found that around 50% of what we were sending to landfill from across the two regions was in fact organics, as Harvey mentioned. Around the same time, we were doing a bit of research around circular economy and local government to see how we might actually participate in circular economy. And so we asked our local government partners what kind of projects they might want to participate in to understand how we might participate in circular economy. And an organics project was one of the highest ranked items. So a combination of the Waikato Wellbeing goals, what we were getting from our local government partners, as well as central government signals, led us to looking further into organics. And that's how the Circularising Organics project was created. So we had 3 areas of inquiry. So collections and processing. So that means how you collect the material, what you do with it, how you turn it into something else. Contamination. So it's all well and good to collect something and process it, but if it has contamination, there's going to be a problem. And once you create something, where is it going to go? What's it going to be? So what market is there? So the point of the whole project was to support the development of a robust and resilient organics material system to improve soil health, reduce emissions, feed families, create jobs, and increase mana. So trying to reach across the other SDGs as well. So the project was managed by Waikato Regional Council and contributed to by a group of subject matter experts that did their own research, but then came together regularly so we could create a multidisciplinary view on the issue. So Liam, who's going to speak, and Rachel, who are going to speak, were part of that team. So the project resulted in 6 reports and 1 decision-making tool. And so all that's available on the Waikato Regional Council website. So I won't go into everything, but I'll just note that Liam's going to talk about circularizing organics. So that looks at opportunity for a network approach to processing organics. And Rachel's going to talk about the opportunity for community. So I encourage everyone to go and have a look at the research, but just to give you a flavor of what some of our findings were, when in the context of the Sustainable Development Goals, what we found is we really need to have a network approach and look broadly across systems. So it's not just looking at organics, and it's not even just looking about waste, it's looking about how we contribute and how we fit into the whole system. So we need to look at organic material as part of an interconnected system. So if we're thinking about the issue of contamination, we actually can't just look at organics and try to eliminate contamination in organics. We have to consider that contamination, so that's either physical contamination like plastics, or chemical contamination like PFAS or herbicides. That's part of our lives, so it's going to be a part of organics, but it's not necessarily a problem we can solve just for this separated thing. It has to be all linked. In terms of when we were thinking about Sustainable Development Goal 12, and the goal, of course, is to eliminate things from landfill because we want to put it in a higher use, but we can't just shift the problem. So we need to be looking at how, of course, we want to get organics out of landfill, but we also have to make sure that the system itself works really well. And so it needs to be part of a network. It needs to be contributing more widely to our societal goals. So I'll also encourage people, if they're interested, to have a look at the Wasteman's TA Forum Organic Waste and Collection Processing Guide. So we worked with them. So this is complementary to the research we've done. And so when used in combination, they can help a lot of understanding and decision-making to be done. So I think that's available on their website, but I can always send out a link afterwards. So the link for the research is on the top there. And we just want to say a big thank you for the Ministry for Environment's Waste Minimization Fund, and of course, the Waikato Wellbeing Project. So next, we're going to have Liam, like I said, discuss the localizing organics. So that's looking at a network approach. Rachel's going to discuss what community aspirations there might be, and then Paul is going to talk about what's actually some great work that's already happening on the ground, so to really bring this whole thing to life. Thanks so much, and I'll pass over to Liam.
Kia ora tātou, and kia ora Valerie. Thanks for that introduction. And yeah, kia ora to everyone who's here. My name's Liam Prince. I'm based in Te Whanganui-a-Tara, Wellington. And yeah, it was a pleasure to be part of this Circularising Organics project. I have a bit of experience doing research with the Zero Waste Network and some other organizations as well. And I'm also an avid composter myself. So yeah, really, it's a space that I'm really, really keen on. So I was responsible for a couple of chapters in this project. The first was a literature review on contamination, and in terms of both defining and understanding the problem, and also looking at best practice approaches to preventing and mitigating that contamination. But it is the second contribution to this work that I'll be talking about today, which is the chapter called Localising Organics. And I'll start with, what do we mean by localizing? So what we're talking about is on-site, small and medium scale, locally based organics collections and processing facilities. These are systems where organic materials either don't need to be transported anywhere because they are processed on site. So that could be composting at home, or that could be a processing facility at a business's premises. Or it's where materials are collected and processed locally at places like resource recovery centres, nearby farms, multi-unit dwellings or apartment complexes, marae, schools, community gardens, and so on. And I'm just going to share just a couple of slides just so you get a sense of some of the things I'm talking about. Also, apologies for this, for all the words on the screen. You don't have to look at them all. Mainly for the hierarchy on the left-hand side there. This was developed as part of the Circularising Organics project. And so as you can see there, we've got on-site as the third tier down, small scale, medium scale, and then large scale. So what's really important about the chapter that I'm talking about is it's not about comparing and contrasting the pros and cons of these different systems, or what are very commonly distinguished as decentralized or centralized approaches. There's plenty of discussion about that already. What this chapter is rather about is exploring the benefits and the ways of integrating all of these approaches into a network. So having on-site, small and medium scale activities working alongside the much more common use of large scale regional facilities. So some of the key benefits that we explore in this chapter of integrating all of these systems are things like actually diverting more organic materials from landfill, and also increasing participation of households and businesses in collection services, taking advantage of nimble and flexible models to quickly implement systems, and also building some resilience into the overall system, reducing the costs and environmental impacts of having to transport materials to facilities that might be located at a faraway distance, building uses for the end products, things like compost, into the system rather than needing to develop so much external markets, by co-locating processing sites at places like community gardens, farms, and parks, and also integrating ways of building community and engaging the general public in things like composting and all of the many benefits that come along with that. This chapter also looked at policies and regulations that local and central government could implement to help remove barriers to doing more of this kind of thing, both bylaws and planning rules, and also providing support with things like training, staffing, technical assistance, land, facilities, equipment, funding, contracting, and procurement. And obviously there's a lot more detail in the chapter. But the chapter concludes with four scenarios, that just very brief scenarios, and this is kind of one representation of a scenario of how these different things could kind of work in a map. And it's sort of a little bit busy, this this particular diagram, but this is from a similar sort of study done for Portugal, and it came up with sort of a model of what this could look like. But in the Localising Organics chapter, we look at what this could look like in Waikato, in the you know, kind of in a real world context. So both from a densely populated sort of scenario like in Hamilton, through to a sparsely populated rural districts like Waitomo, Otorohanga, Coromandel, and others. And again, these scenarios are based on some international and also local Aotearoa case studies as well. So we also looked at New York City, Besançon in France, and Austria as well as looking at some great local case studies like Extreme Zero Waste in Raglan. So I'll leave it there. There's obviously a lot more in the chapter. There's also a whole lot of resources where you can read more about different models, different systems, and different ways of thinking about this. But I'm also very happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Liam. I'll just pick up from here. So I'll just share my screen, and then just let me know if everyone can see that okay. Awesome. Thanks, Liam. Thanks, Val and Harvey, for the opportunity to share a little bit about the work that I contributed to. I had the wonderful opportunity of actually going out to the community to understand the role that they currently play in the collection and processing of organics, and what their aspirations are to do more. So it's always a pleasure to go out and see what's actually happening on the ground, and hear from the people that are actually doing that work practically. So a very kind of three broad areas, as I mentioned, unpacking what they're doing now as it relates to collection and processing, also what their aspirations were, as well as key opportunities and barriers as they saw it. I interviewed 20 organisations, mostly one-to-one interviews, but also had a group workshop in the Thames Coromandel, with most organisations based in the Waikato, but a couple outside that had intentions to operate here. They were already operating, or intentions to support, so subject matter expertise that could really enable community participation in a network. And out of scope was really home composting and Māori enterprise, which was covered in another part of the research. When I looked at the organisations across the Waikato, I wanted to get a bit of a mix in terms of experience and structure. So we had a couple of very experienced operators with over 20 years experience in terms of collecting and processing. However, most were kind of mid-stage, so they'd been doing this work for around 5 or so years, and a couple of organisations that were already operating in other areas of resource recovery, but planning to move into collecting and processing organics in kind of a medium scale. So this just gives you a flavour really across community, social enterprise, charities, schools, as well as businesses. So a good representation across the region. Liam already shared the organic material processing hierarchy, but this is just a little more detail of the organisations that I spoke to and where they kind of sit on this hierarchy. So very much towards the top, with a focus on kind of on-site, so community organisations that are collecting food scraps from the community and processing that, through to small and medium scale enterprises, one operating an organics curbside collection, others doing household collections, smaller scaled services. Also had a couple of organisations in the food rescue. But what I found really interesting when I spoke to organisations that are either operating kind of free services for the community or paid services, or through rates funded services, they all had kind of prevention and behaviour change as a core part of the work and the reason that they were doing this. So that really aligns to the SDG 12, I think, in terms of what you get when community is really deeply involved in this work, is that they have that bigger picture of talking with community more broadly around the opportunities to prevent waste in the first place, preventing food waste. And I think that's the real goal of having community participation. So just to share some key themes, which actually that just bumped a little bit. Yeah, so it's key themes that came from the research. What the community shared was really that food resilience and sovereignty and behaviour change were the key drivers for being involved in organics. They also were mostly using hot composting and vermicomposting methods to process the material. Most of the organisations I spoke to, I think, were focused more on processing. However, a few were also doing collection and/or processing, so that was a good mix there. They felt that localised models, so what Liam was just describing, was critical, actually, to how they saw the real opportunity to address, I guess, negative environmental impacts, as well as, having the circular opportunity of growing food, keeping, the local soils nourished. So that circular opportunity that having localised efforts provides. They'd also felt that although there's a real opportunity to have, localised and lots of kind of smaller, businesses or community enterprises or community organisations playing a role, there was likely needed to be integrated with a larger scale facility or curbside collection. That wasn't universal, that view, that you couldn't just have a kind of localised model, but most organisations, particularly our more experienced ones, saw the need to have that larger regional facility as well. And then when we were thinking about that kind of integrated model and what that might look like, that we looked holistically around the outcomes that we wanted. So that broader social, environmental and economic outcomes were underpinning any design work. And this, again, the anaerobic digestion came up throughout the interviews, and a general feeling was that it wasn't the best solution for food scraps, because then you're missing an opportunity to retain those food scraps to build soil, grow food. So really to think about, again, that holistic picture. That was really exciting to see, because there is already existing networks that are undertaking this work. So there is community resource recovery centres that are already playing an important role in collecting and processing organics. There's schools that are actually doing composting and food growing, and there's community centres which are doing the same. And there was examples where schools and community centres or community organisations were working together. So there was a real opportunity there to not only collect food scraps and process them in partnership, but then also the education opportunities that fall out of that. And yeah, the key theme there was an opportunity to scale out by bringing in other schools, community centres and CRCs into a broader network. Another key theme was around the business organics. So most of the organisations that I spoke with were tackling food scraps from households. There was some that were providing services to businesses. But given that the business volumes are larger than residential, there was generally feeling that there was an opportunity there. Although as you scale up, contamination and collection and management all becomes more complex. So there was that recognition of an opportunity, but also the complexity as well. Interestingly, contamination wasn't mentioned as a key barrier currently, but more recognised as one in the future. My feeling from the research was that for a lot of our community level organisations, they were doing a lot of behaviour change when talking to communities, so they could kind of closer to the material that was going in to be processed, so managing it that way. And then generally maybe some of the chemical contaminants aren't widely understood and their potential for contamination as well. But it certainly speaks to an opportunity when you have smaller volumes and you're able to manage those more effectively for physical contaminants. And then the carbon cycle systems were quite popular, so they were operating in a number of kind of medium scale operators as well as community level. And the community the organisations that I spoke to found them really useful, and yeah, just the support that you get. So in terms of helping, to get more of these, smaller community level composters going, there's a real opportunity to work with carbon cycle. So I mentioned the importance of the localised model as key part of this overall network. And so there were a lot of organisations that were very keen to do more and grow, but they felt that there were a number of barriers. So I just wanted to share one of those, a few of those, and some recommendations. For our larger, more experienced organisations, they felt that there was a lack of sector expertise around commercial composting. So much so that two of them were planning to develop their own kind of capability building and a centre for excellence around that to really build that capability. And that would also enable career pathways, which they felt was lacking in preventing kind of talent being attracted to the sector. There was feedback that infrastructure funding was more readily available, but funding for operations was a very short supply. So in order to take more material, process more material, you did need more hands, and that seemed to be a key barrier for many organisations. Similarly, around the behaviour change work, because a lot of the organisations have that embedded into the work that they do, that is not funded either, but it's a core part of what they do and would like to do more. And there were some barriers around current policy, regulation and bylaws, which I'll share a little bit more about, and the lack of, knowledge and cohesion between central and local government was mentioned as a barrier as well, which I'll talk a little bit more about. Yeah, so community felt that they would be enabled with more opportunity to access operational funding for their work as well as infrastructure. There is, just from speaking to organisations, there is a lot of expertise out there. Particularly, there's some quite experienced organisations doing this work, and they would really love to be engaged in additional research as to, pushing this network forward. So they're ready to engage, which I think we do know. There was an opportunity around amending and introducing regulation and bylaws that encourage community participation. So there were examples, and that's relating to the resource consenting and zoning, whereby there is green space that could be made available to community to use for composting, that for zoning, there's zoning constraints around how that can be used. So there was some good detail around that in my report. And particularly this was kind of Thames Coromandel, where there had been a organics rollout in terms of that curbside service, and they were very keen, the community, for local authorities to really think about how we keep that processing locally if that curbside collection is in place for households. Yeah, so upskilling council staff, around decentralised models or localised composting versus centralised would be really helpful, as well as just general increased knowledge around commercial composting. They thought that would be helpful. Implementing social or sustainable procurement strategies to make localised composting, a localised model more feasible for councils to focus on. And then, yeah, the education piece around building overall capability in organics collection and processing and composting to address that kind of lack of sector expertise. And then, yeah, the opportunity with schools to really build that education, which I'm sure Paul will talk about in his kōrero after this. But yeah, there was a general feeling that those schools and existing networks were a real opportunity. Yeah, so in summary, there's a lot of activity happening at the community level. You know, most of it would be on-site, small scale, medium scale, but very experienced operators, you know, processing and collecting significant volume. So there's a real opportunity to enable them to play a bigger role. And with that, I will stop sharing and, yeah, take any questions now or later. Thank you. I'll pass over to Paul.
Unmute, that's what you need to do. And, oh, sorry about that. Ka pai. Tēnā koe, Rachel. Tēnā koe, Harvey, mō te karakia o te rā, me te whakapau i a mātou, e ngā kai kōrero, tēnā koutou, o te rā, e ngā iwi i mai taki ana, e huihui mai nei, tēnā koutou. I'm Paul, Program Specialist at Tarakore, and I'm here today to introduce you to a current passion of mine, which is community compost hubs. And listening to everyone else's kōrero, I think it's going to be a wonderful opportunity to illustrate a lot of what we've just been hearing and showing you what it looks like. So the burning question you may have is, what is a compost hub? Which I will describe in a minute. But first of all, a key component about this project is that this is a hot compost. So if you're knowledgeable about composts, you'll know that a hot compost means that it gets to that really high temperature that deals with the pathogens in the soil, which means you can compost every kind of food waste. So it can take meat, dairy, fish heads, bones, the lot. And just as Rachel was talking about before, you can see in the photo, Carbon Cycle has been a partner that we've been working alongside for these projects. And they're quite perfect in the sense because they can process every kind of food waste and at scale. So a community compost hub then is when you get one of these hot compost units and you find a place in the community where you may have a college, 2 or 3 primary schools in the vicinity, some early childhood centres, a community house, could be a marae, could be any of these things. You put the hub, the hot compost unit, in the centre of that. So it's not just solving the issues of food waste for one organisation, it's creating a hub for the entire community. Most importantly, it's connected to community gardens, and that's a really important aspect of this, which I'll talk about in a bit. Now, this is great for communities that are not targeted for any council-led curbside food collection, but aside from that, schools do not have curbside collection anyway, because that's residential rates based. So schools and community organizations are often left struggling with, you know, what to do with their food waste and how to deal with it, you know, at scale. And the photos I'm sharing here are from Te Kowhata Primary School, the Te Kowhata Community Compost Hub, which is our first one in the Waikato district. And hopefully the hub will be located somewhere that's within walking distance or within cargo bike distance, that you're not having to use any transport or create any emissions in the operating of the hub. So the initial project began with the issue of school lunches, which you may have heard of, where schools are being provided with lunches, but it ends up having quite an impact on their systems, and organic waste is massive at school. Now, a really important point to make here is that just because you have the compost doesn't make food waste okay. It doesn't mean that we can waste food. We also, that's another conversation, we want to prevent the wasting of perfectly good food and perfectly edible food. Just because the compost is there doesn't mean, oh, don't worry, we can compost it. Still want to protect the mana of our kai and to look after that and to eat it and use it first. But an important point about the compost hub is that it's more than just waste minimization. So this is also about creating nutrient-rich soil full of mauri that can grow food for us. And so it's more than just getting rid of the food waste, it's also what it creates and what it produces. So our goals are to reduce waste to landfill, as we heard earlier, and to entirely remove food waste from the waste stream. Our goal is also to regenerate local soils to grow kai at the community level, to build community resilience, and as we were hearing also, soil sovereignty and food sovereignty. So this is being in control of the nutrients that go into the soil, the nutrients that go into our kai, and the nutrients that go into us. It's respecting the whakapapa of our kai. It's knowing where our kai comes from and what has gone into it, and therefore what goes into us. It's a localized circular solution, so it greatly reduces transport and emissions. We're not driving our waste around. We're not driving the compost around. We're not driving anything around, actually. In this model in Te Kauwhata, the community gardens are literally right across the street. Within viewing distance of school, you can see the community gardens. So the food waste generated on site at school literally goes across the street. And I'll show you some photos of that in a bit. Funding for this project has come through our partnership with Waikato District Council, and they have been very enthusiastic and very keen on these projects, and it comes out of their waste levy funds. They're dedicated and enthusiastic and supportive of these projects, and turning up to all of our events. So the project itself, how we've done it is, it's, as we know, it's more than just putting bins somewhere. That's not going to create the change, as Rachel was touching on with behavior change. So we have put together a project that is with wraparound education for an entire year. Now that is the first full year cycle of the compost, from the installation, from when we set up the boxes to when we build the first box full of compost, through all the stages of turning it and maintaining it, through to the end when we harvest it. So we have set in school speak each term, we have a wānanga, and we get all the stakeholders from the project together. And so we had installation day, you can see by the photos, everybody's involved. A couple of months later, we come back for the first turning of the compost. Everybody's back again, opening up the compost, seeing what's going on. What does it look like? What should it be doing? What are the moisture levels? What are the oxygen levels? How is the process going? Understanding the process of the compost. We're all learning how to maintain the compost together. And with this, we learn about soil health. We learn about healthy soil indicators. We learn about the FBI, that's a carbon cycle term, the fungi and bacteria and invertebrates. We learn about the soil web, who's doing the work in the soil, what conditions they like. And this is real learning. This is science in our hands, in our senses. We're learning about the soil that grows our kai, that adds to our health. And moreover, we're learning how to maintain and care for the soil that feeds us. We are the land and the land is us. And it acknowledges the interconnectedness of everything, that the health of any one system is entirely dependent on the health of all others. So explaining circular systems or localized systems to kids, that might be quite tricky, but experientially, they're learning it and they're seeing how their food is turning into soil right in front of their eyes. As we know, we can't just put bins in places and expect things to happen. So the engagement and communication has been really key. The education that goes along with it has been really key. However, the overall winning factor, success factor of these compost hubs working has been the compost hub manager. So as part of our funding, we've specifically set money aside to pay somebody 2 hours a week for the first full year, plus the training days, to be the hub manager. And let me please introduce you to Rhonda, there on the right. She's a super nan. I was laughing at her number plate on her car yesterday, which said bad nan. She's out there just doing the mahi. She's a great grandma, I think. And she's the compost manager. She's driving it. So she manages the collections from the schools, plural, from the community. And with carbon cycle training, she has learned how to process and add it and to make sure it doesn't just turn into a dumping ground, lifting the lid and dumping stuff in. So she's on it for the first full year, but yeah, without the manager, it would be that. My colleague, Ngako, said once, we need heaps of Rhondas. We need a Rhonda in every community. And I think that's a really good point. Yes, you can have the infrastructure, but you need to have that management and that oversight. And it's not me, it's not us, it's not Parakore, it's somebody in the community that has that role, and we're passing it on over to them. So the training and learning is for everybody, not just the compost hub manager. It can't be reliant on just one person. Our goal is to hand over the compost hub entirely to the community, that their sense of ownership surrounds the compost, that they know how to run it, they know how to maintain it, that the sense of it being theirs. So when we open up these Wānanga Day, we invite everybody across the community, and there in the center there beside the drag fork, you can see Pam. She became the compost hub manager for the second compost hub that we started just on April 30th in Rahui Pōkeka in Huntly, on the land of the Matawhanui Trust at the Kahui Tuwa Marakai Community Garden right behind the Huntly Power Station. This is our second hub that's gone in. So she came along to the Te Kaupara days and got enthusiastic and took that idea back to Rahui Pōkeka in Huntly, and now we've got a second hub going there as well. A quote from Rhonda: overall, the kids participate because they can see the end result of zero food waste from school. And we've talked about the benefits of compost going back into the school gardens. So they get it. They can see that the food that they put in becomes the soil in front of their eyes. Yeah. Feedback and improvement. So this was basically our sort of pilot run for the Waikato district. So there's been lots of feedback loops in place, both for the actual compost, how we open it up and keep learning from it and learning how to monitor it and maintain it. But we also liaise closely with the school and the community gardens and also Rhonda to ensure that it's meeting their needs as a community and that it works the best way for them, because ultimately it's by them and for them. Now, this was just Thursday last week. This is not even a week ago, and we finally opened up the final box of our compost. Installation was October last year, and so August, now we are ready to harvest for the first time the compost that we've created from our food waste. And this is the finished product. So just everyone going, wow, when we open up the boxes and see this beautiful, dark, black, sweet smelling compost. There we are. And here's a good photo of the mayor of the district who came along, and I called this Soil Geeks because we were so excited over our soil. We were all touching it, we're all getting our hands in it and looking at it and photographing it. So there's the mayor with the compost manager admiring our finished product of nearly a year's worth of work. So it's a best day out for the kids. Each time we've just had a big group of kids and they're really doing all the work. They're doing it. I'm standing back. My job's taking the photos and telling the story. I'm not doing the work. And by about the second turning, when I asked the lead teacher at Te Kauwhata Primary, I said, okay, do you think we're going to need another wānanga? And she said, no, I think we've got this sussed. We're sorted. We know what to do. We know how to turn it. We know when to turn it. We know what to do with it. And to me, that was success, because we want to hand this over to them, and we want to step back, and the compost hub continues run by the community. So the kids have been really engaged. They're part of the processing it every single week with Rhonda on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Some of the teachers are even taking food bins home and bringing their food waste from home into school so that they can do that. And the teachers have been really excited, saying, my rubbish, I used to have this much and now I only have this much. And they're seeing the impacts and the benefits of removing that, what do we hear, 48% organics from their landfill. And they can see the cost savings, they can see the benefit, they can see the environmental benefits. And so it's kind of organically spreading, and more want to be involved. This is just a photo of the mayor shoveling compost. I think that's a pretty great sight to see. And their support really has been awesome. So from there, we applied the compost to the school gardens. This was into their kumara garden around the back. And it's compost at scale. So we had several trailer loads and several wheelbarrow loads that we took around school. And then we also took it across the road to the community gardens, and you can see the soil regeneration happening right there in front of our eyes, that beautiful dark compost going on to the community gardens. And you can see the school in the background. That's literally how far it went. So school over there, compost applying to the gardens over this side. And this is a true community garden in the sense that it is feeding people, and it's feeding those that need it and are vulnerable and rely on this kai. So it has a purpose. There we are. So a concept in permaculture is the idea of turning your problem into your solution. So we've taken our problem, which was the food waste at school and the food waste going into landfill, and we've turned it into our solution. And what a beautiful solution it's become. But hot off the press, even hotter off the press, this was yesterday. I took this photo yesterday. This is back in Rahui Pōkeka. This is the first turning of their compost. And the Huntley Primary School kids turned up for this. And it was so hard case because it was their first encounter with compost. And I don't have a photo of it here, but they were all holding their noses going, "Hey, hey." They just thought it was terrible. And by the end of the day, they were holding it, they were smelling it, they sat on it to have their lunch. The stigma of whatever it was, that was half the education right there, that actually this is natural, that this is what it's supposed to be, that this soil is a good thing. It's not a yuck thing. Rubbish is a yuck thing. Compost is a health thing. And so shifting that mindset, and you can't tell kids about it, but by touching it and holding it and smelling it and seeing it, that's the shift. And that changes behavior right there. So next up, we're working our way through the district. We've got one in Te Kauwhata, we've got one in Rahui Pōkeka, that's the newest one. And we've got our sights set on Ngārua Wahia. That's going to be the next community compost hub that'll take it to 3 in the district. And the mayor was speaking to me last week, really keen to get it further up in the district into the northern Waikato region. So we've got a lot of work ahead of us. But the success is there, the excitement and the enthusiasm is there. So I'll finish off with the whakatauki, which is te toto o te tangata he kai, te oranga o te tangata he whenua. Which means the blood, the life force of people is kai, but the health of people is the land, is the soil. Orera mihi ana kia koutou. Nā koutou, that's community compost hubs. And I guess I will hand it back to Harvey, perhaps.
Thanks, Paul. And I think I'll probably hand it straight back to Val, because now it's an opportunity for korero from everyone and any questions and answers. That's right, Val?
Yes. So if anyone has any questions, please let us know. You can either unmute yourself or put something in the chat. Just so that everyone knows, all the speakers know, we don't have any questions in the chat yet, but there's just lots of great feedback, lots of positive feedback for the work that we've all done. So way to go, everyone. It's great to hear everything come together, and it's really inspiring to see where we need to go next, which is to continue to put things on the ground. So it's great. We'll give everyone a second to raise hands if they want a question. Otherwise, we will.
Hi, kia ora, Val, Nicole here. I do have a question.
Hi, Nicole.
Hey, how are you? So apologies for my absolute lateness. I've had a bit of a personal nightmare this morning. Anyway, who's funded this group? This is jointly between Y District and Regional, or is it just Waikato District that have funded this?
So the Circularising Organics project was a WMF, so it's the Waste Minimization Fund,
yep.
and Waikato Wellbeing funded project. So Waikato Regional Council managed the project, and that was a research project. So that's where Liam and Rachel were discussing, and then Paul was discussing Waikato District funded compost hubs.
Cheers, thank you.
If there's no other questions other than lots of positive feedback in the chat, which is great. Oh, and Harvey, yeah.
Well, I'm just tempted to ask the question of the presenters, Val and you. Yeah, we've got a big goal for SDG 12 in the Waikato. It feels to me like it's really achievable. I just want to get a sense from all the speakers. Do you agree?
I'll let someone else have a chance to respond. You can just unmute yourself and jump in.
I can jump in and say yes. Simple yes, I reckon. Absolutely. I mean, and it's, you know, all around the country, there's, you know, here in Wellington where I am, it's similar to over 50% of the household waste going to landfill is organic stuff. And it's just the easiest thing to do something with, do something awesome like Paul's demonstrated. Yeah, it's just about getting all sectors of society on board with it. But also I think as well as the volume, getting that volume out, it's all of those other benefits that Paul and Rachel and myself have talked about, ensuring that we don't just kind of go for the easy big option, build a big machine over there and we'll just send it all there. But yeah, we can do it in a really positive community building way, soil building way as well.
Yeah, I can agree with Liam on that. Just through the my work in this research, you really do get to see what community is already doing. You know, and it's some of it, you know, we've got community organisation, you know, doing a curbside collection for a town in terms of organic. So you get to see the scale, and then you get to see what Paul has demonstrated perfectly, which is, you know, what you can do with, you know, community and schools. So I think if you take the, you know, the various models that are already out there and provide support in terms of capability and funding to seed things, I think there's a real opportunity for localised activity to help with that goal and work with some of the bigger facilities that will be needed for some of our more challenging waste streams.
Yep, I agree with all that. And also just the comment of, you know, getting it to every sector. So I demonstrated what's happening with schools and community organizations, but what's happening with businesses or cafes or hospitality or health. You know, there's lots of other areas to also hit, and there's other models that can be involved where this can become local income generation. You know, there was a model in Te Awamutu where we had a hub like this where it became employment for people in the community to collect the organics and to bring it to the hub, and cafes paid a subscription kind of thing. So there's different models, and some will involve money and some won't, some will be funded, some will be business opportunities or community enterprise. But we just want to be targeting all those different aspects in the ways that are most fitting. But yeah, hopeful indeed, and beyond just whether we think it's going to happen, it needs to happen. It has to happen. This is reducing waste and composting. This is climate action. In action, and it's just a really important focus.
Kia ora, everyone. Anna, do you have a question?
Yeah, thank you. Yes, awesome presentations, everybody. I just a question, I guess, as a city council, I'm wondering how critical the district councils are to this work. I mean, obviously the mayor was in that, a lot of your photos, Paul, but I guess just, asking how critical they are, but also their resourcing of these initiatives. I know we at Hamilton City have a waste minimisation fund which helps to contribute to some of these initiatives. But I just wonder, like, what kind of perspective you have on the importance of that resourcing and local councils being involved. Anyone can answer.
I think just in general, perhaps to start with, I think it's really critical that they are involved, because the operations of waste sit at the local council level. So it is the work that they are doing, and there's the money and the funds that are coming through for projects like these, and for waste minimisation. So I think it sits really clearly in that space where we can connect in with what's actually happening at the local level in communities, and build that resilience at the community level, rather than another big, like as Liam said, a big infrastructure system somewhere else far away.
Yeah, I totally support that, Paul. Thanks for the question, Anna. Because I mean, really the only other space, I mean, there may be, I suppose, independent, private, philanthropic investors and funders and whatever who might be interested. But other than that, councils and central government are really kind of the only big places. Maybe I guess maybe regional council. I don't know, that maybe Valerie can speak to that. But the central government funding at the moment is really just they're focused on this idea of scale and impact. So to really big, big types of systems, which, as we've talked about, are a piece of the puzzle, but only one piece of the puzzle. And so I think local government is a really key piece in that, and building that local resilience, as Paul's talked about. I don't think there's any other kind of entity that really sits in that space.
And I would add, Anna, it does, like everyone said, it does fall under what some of the local government responsibilities under the Local Government Act. So around well-being and the 4 well-beings, and so it's very relevant, and local government's very well placed to help set these things up. But the next phase is to look at, like some of the speakers have alluded to, is how can they be sustainable as models in and of themselves? So how can we make sure that they're not reliant on ongoing funding, which can go up and down depending on different scenarios. So how can we safeguard these as systems that are set in the community? So that's kind of the next step.
Yeah, I'll just add that picture too, Anna, with Val, and so Waikato District, Regional, and Waipa and ourselves have got sort of a background joint plan brewing with Parakore, and we too have actually done some, and obviously it's one of our sort of overarching goals in our new WMMP. I think it's one of our top 3 goals, getting food scraps out of landfill, and we too have been doing some work on trying to understand how, Nick Turner and I have done quite a bit of work on trying to understand, exactly like Val said, how to make it a financially viable business for somebody. I mean, HCC have certainly got pieces of land or parks or whatever where those opportunities can be provided, but it's we've been doing trying to really understand how much, how do you charge businesses, and then what, from a resource consent perspective, what it looks like when you're selling that compost at the other end. And there'll be some resource consent rules around that, and also there's some sort of sciencey things around testing and bits and pieces, which we haven't got to the bottom of it yet. But obviously been looking at Liam's website and talking to different people around understanding, what's a charge, what's a fee, and then, what does it look like at the other end. So yeah, definitely high on our list of things we're trying to get to the bottom of. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments?
Just a quick question around the compost hub managers. I was really intrigued by that, Paul, because that seems like such an important aspect that perhaps hasn't been built into a lot of these projects before. So that's quite a new idea, or has it happened elsewhere in New Zealand and kind of made quite a big difference to the sustainability of those initiatives?
Sure, Anna. Can't comment on whether it's been done elsewhere in New Zealand. I can just comment on within our work that we've done. This was the first time that we did that in our projects. Rhonda was our first one, and it absolutely 100% has been crucial and critical to the success of it. We had a previous hub in Kirikiriroa, actually in Hamilton, where we didn't have the compost manager. And this is the one at Fraser and Western Community Centre, and it's been kind of reliant on some volunteer time and volunteer teacher time. But of course, if that teacher goes, who's doing it? Where's the learning? Who's looking after it? So that's been a bit of a challenge to think of how do we keep making sure that compost is being looked after. But likewise, the compost hub manager we have with Rhonda has been funded for a year, for that training period. So Rhonda asked me yesterday a very pertinent question saying, so what happens after September? And back to my colleague Ngako's comment, we need compost hub, we need Rhondas everywhere. Like, wouldn't this be great if this could somehow be ongoing employment? Like, this should be a valuable role in the community as somebody who manages the compost to deal with the community waste. Can we get ongoing funding? It was $3,000 for a whole year. I mean, that's nothing to create this role. That's nothing. So let's have a compost hub manager in each community attached to each hub ongoing to process our local town's food waste. I mean, isn't that important? So yeah. I don't know what's going to happen after this first year. This is our pilot test. It was a new idea, but we'd love to see it carry on.
I think there's a couple of really good examples of that in Auckland, Anna, with the Carbon Cycle Company and some of the systems that they've got set up in different places. Sylvia Park, so there's shopping centres and where they have the system set up, and that they have a paid compost manager to oversee that. Otherwise, what Paul said, you do get rubbish going in. It's the opportunity to change behaviour as well. So from hearing from the community, those paid roles are really important. And as Paul said, this is such a critical opportunity and service with multiple benefits. So yeah, finding the business model is key, and paying people, I think, is important as well to enable scale.
Just to jump back in, so if you did have like a monthly subscription or something with hospitality or food waste or compost hubs, that could pay. There you go, pay for the compost manager. They don't have to pay a huge amount, but they just pay something per week. And I know there's other models out there of other people doing this kind of work. Anyway, yeah, like that.
And just in the chat, just for context, Liam made the point that the international models in terms of the structure for some of these systems. So that's New York City and in France, both have strong local government support, which was a big key to success. Any other questions? Right. With that, I might pass over to Harvey and for our closing.
Kia ora, Val. Before I say karakia, maybe one comment if I can. Paul, in those photos I saw tamariki and rangatahi, not a single smartphone in sight, with their hands dirty and active, and all smiles. And if anyone's read Jonathan Haidt's work on childhood anxiety and the relationship with overuse of smartphones and dislocation from nature, I think there's a huge mental health wellbeing benefit to this as well, to state maybe the obvious once again. So big mihi to you on that. Okay, just to close. Kia tātou katoa, te atawhai o tō tātou ariki, o ihu karaiti, me te araha o te atua, me te whiwhinga tahitanga, ki te wairua tapu, ake, āmene. Thanks, Val.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Taki te.
Cool.
Right, that's
Thanks,
it.
Harvey.
Thank you. That was, wow, really inspiring, eh?
Yeah, and I really want to use the recording and share the recording as well, because you know, not everyone can make the time, and I know a few people had said that they couldn't make the time. So I think that's going to be really awesome to keep spreading the message.